Anna's heel caught on the rough cobblestone as she raced down the alley. She fought for breath. Her chest constricted in her tight corset. Her hair tangled down her back, whipping her face as she ran, disheveling from the careful curls she'd pinned them in. Her skirts swished around her feet and threatened to trip her, panic filling her steps. She shivered as the damp London air caressed her cheeks, nose, and throat. The click of another set of footsteps on the stones followed her into the alley, beating out the same pounding rhythm of her heart. Somewhere in the distance, the River Thames bubbled away, blocking out the city's sounds beyond the narrow corridor. "There is no reason to run, Anna." His thick Berkshire accent filled the alley, reverberating off the stones. She tried to ignore how the sound soothed down her skin like warm honey and settled in her stomach with a flutter. She sped up, racing further down the alley. Her eyes searched for a place to hide or barrier to protect her, anything to stop the man following her so persistently. But the space was vacant, besides the brick wall looming before her, preventing her escape. There was nowhere she'd be able to hide from the man, no protection to be sought. Once he caught her, she'd be his, to do with as he pleased, regardless of her protests. Her stomach somersaulted at the idea, not entirely scared or displeased. But that can't be true. I couldn't want to be his captive. Glancing over her shoulder, she gauged how far he was behind her. The clump of his footsteps pinpointed his exact location with ease. The fog curled around his silhouette, giving her only the outline of his body over coat and top hat. His shoulders were broad, his hips lean, his square jaw clenched, his gaze fixed forward toward his prey. Me. She turned back around, and her heart sank, her entire body shaking as the end to the alley loomed all too close. Slowing, she braced her hands against the rough bricks blocking her escape. The stones were cold and slimy against her fingers. Her heart pounded, but she couldn't give up. I need to find a way out of this alley, a way to safety. Digging her fingers into the mortar between the stones, Anna tried to leverage herself up and climb the wall. If she could get over it, to the other side, she'd be free. Free of this man and the confusing traitor's urges currently curling within her. She scrambled furiously, trying to inch her way up the wall as the steps behind her moved closer, pounding faster. Every muscle in her body shook as she kicked the toes of her boots into the crevices between bricks. She only got half a foot off the ground before the man's steps ended and his hand wrapped around her waist, pulling her down to the street. He swirled her around, crowding her against the uneven wall. "Where are you going, Anna?" He pressed his body into hers, pushing her flat against the stones. Light-headed, she fought for each breath against the tight grip of her corset and the weight of his body. But it was his eyes that kept her pinned, so dark and commanding. They stared down into hers as if he could see deep within her, to a center even she didn't understand. Her muscles quivered and her stomach knotted. A traitorous tingle started between her legs. She looked up into his eyes, and he smiled as if he knew. He knew what her body was doing, that she hated it, and he reveled in her confusion. But she refused to show her weakness. Throwing her shoulders back and straightening her spine the best she could against the brick wall, she turned to her captor and looked him directly in his tantalizing eyes. She wouldn't let him intimidate her, no matter how her body reacted beneath his stare. "What do you want from me, sir?" Her voice was breathier than she intended, most likely due to the small amount of oxygen she could get into her lungs beneath the corset. "You know what I want." He stepped closer, pressing his hard body into hers. She stifled a shocked squeal at his weight pressing into her.